I never thought my life could be turned upside down by a lie. Everything seemed perfect. I had a fiancée I loved, a father I admired, and a future that looked brighter than anything I could have imagined. Mary had been in my life for 2 years, and in that time, she had become my world. Every smile, every word, every plan we made felt like a piece of a dream I didn't want to wake up from. My father, Marcus, had always been a guiding force in my life. He taught me to be honest, to respect people, and to work hard for everything I had. His presence was strong, quiet, and commanding. I admired him not just as a father, but as a man who had built everything from nothing. He had a reputation for integrity, and that was something Mary always said she respected about him. At least, that's what I thought. The day everything started to change was one I'll never forget. It was a sunny afternoon, and Mary and I were planning the details of our engagement party. We were sitting in the hotel lounge, surrounded by the chatter of people celebrating their lives, but I only had eyes for her. She laughed at something I said, and I felt that familiar warmth in my chest. That warmth turned cold the moment I noticed something in her expression. There was hesitation, a pause, something that didn't belong. I didn't question it immediately. Maybe I was blinded by love, or maybe I wanted to ignore the tiny doubts that started to creep in. The first sign of trouble came a few days later. My father called me, his voice unusually serious. He asked if Mary had ever spoken to me about a business deal she had supposedly handled on her own. I was confused. I had no idea what he was talking about, and when I asked him to explain, he said that someone had mentioned her involvement in a situation that didn't make sense. My stomach sank. I told myself I was overthinking it. My father had always been cautious about people who could hurt me, and maybe this was just one of those moments. Then came the message that changed everything. It was from Mary, and it seemed innocent at first. She said she had talked to someone important, and that she needed my help to sort out a misunderstanding. I trusted her, as I always had. But when I tried to connect the dots, something didn't add up. Her story about the conversation didn't match what I had overheard from my father. I couldn't put my finger on it yet, but a tiny voice in the back of my mind whispered that I should be careful. I pushed it aside. I told myself that love meant trust, and I loved Mary more than I had ever loved anyone. A week later, the doubt became impossible to ignore. I found myself standing outside her apartment, waiting for her to arrive. My heart was pounding, not just from the anticipation of seeing her, but from the fear that something was wrong. When she finally appeared, her smile didn't reach her eyes. I asked her about the conversation she had claimed to have with Marcus. She hesitated. That hesitation was all I needed. I asked again, and her voice changed slightly, softer, almost too careful. I might have said something different, she admitted. That was not an answer. That was a crack in the perfect world, I thought, we shared. I spent the next few days replaying every interaction I had with Mary. I went over her words, her actions, and the little things I had ignored. The smile that didn't quite match her eyes, the way she sometimes avoided answering my questions directly, the subtle way she seemed to manipulate situations to her advantage. I began to see patterns I had been blind to before, but I couldn't believe it. I didn't want to believe it. I told myself that I was imagining things that my father might have misunderstood, that Mary had her reasons for being cautious. Then came the confirmation. It was subtle, almost too small to notice, but it was enough to make my heart drop. I overheard Mary on a phone call. She spoke about Marcus in a way that made my stomach twist. She lied. She lied about my father to someone else, spinning a story that made him look dishonest, like he had done something wrong in business. My hands shook as I listened. Every word was like a hammer hitting my chest. She was not the woman I thought I knew. She had used my trust to build her own image, to manipulate those around her. I left immediately. I didn't confront her. I couldn't, not yet. I needed time to process, to understand, to plan. My father's name, my father's honor, and my own trust had been weaponized against me. I walked through the streets, trying to calm my thoughts, but the anger bubbled beneath the surface. How could someone I loved so much lie about the man who raised me? How could she think she could get away with it? I promised myself that I would find a way to set things right, but not in haste. Revenge, if it came, would be carefully measured. That night, I sat in my apartment, staring at the ceiling. Joanne, my best friend, had always been there for me, and I called her, though I could barely speak. When I finally managed to tell her, she was shocked, but not surprised. She had seen Mary in ways I hadn't. She warned me to be careful, to gather evidence, to stay calm. Her voice was steady, and somehow it gave me the first sense of clarity I had felt in days. I realized then that this was not just about betrayal or heartbreak. This was about truth, about justice, about exposing lies without destroying myself in the process. In the days that followed, I became a shadow in my own life. I watched, I listened, I collected pieces of the puzzle. Mary continued to smile and charm everyone around her, pretending that nothing was wrong, but I knew better. Every word, every gesture, every careful omission was a thread in the web she had spun, and I would unravel it piece by piece. That was the day I realized my perfect life had been an illusion. Everything I had built, everything I had believed in, was suddenly uncertain. But along with that realization came something else, a spark, a determination. I would not be defeated by lies. I would not let her story define my father, my family, or myself. The perfect life I thought I had was gone, but a new mission had begun. And it all started with understanding the truth behind Mary's lie. After that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that everything around me was hiding secrets. Every smile Mary gave, every casual word, seemed coated with something she didn't want me to see. I tried to act normal, to keep pretending that everything was fine, but inside, my mind raced nonstop. Doubts, questions, small suspicions, they all piled up like stones on my chest. It started with little things. A message on her phone that she quickly hid. A call she said was nothing important, but ended abruptly when I walked into the room. Even her tone when she spoke to me changed ever so slightly, like a veil had fallen over her true emotions. I wanted to confront her directly, to demand the truth, but something in me told me that wouldn't help. I had to be careful. I had to understand what I was dealing with. One evening, I met Joanne for coffee. She had noticed my mood was off, and I could see the worry in her eyes. She asked me what was wrong, and I tried to brush it off, but the words caught in my throat. Finally, I told her about the overheard phone call, the lies about my father. Her reaction was immediate, a mixture of anger and concern. "Dorian, you have to be careful," she said. "Mary isn't showing you who she really is, and you need to see the full picture before you do anything." Her words stayed with me as I walked back to my apartment. Joanne had always been the level-headed one. She had a way of looking at situations that I often missed in my emotional haze. That night, I began to pay attention to every detail, every small inconsistency in Mary's behavior. It didn't take long before I found more. There were subtle things in her stories that didn't add up. She told me she had been at her friend's house that evening, but someone had seen her elsewhere. She claimed she hadn't spoken to certain people, yet messages appeared on her phone that contradicted her story. The pieces were small, almost invisible, but together they painted a disturbing picture. I started keeping notes, mentally cataloging each lie, each small act of deception. It felt strange, turning detective in my own life, but the more I observed, the clearer it became that Mary had created a web of manipulation around me. It wasn't just about the lie involving my father. There were other things, too subtle manipulations designed to keep me trusting her, dependent on her, and blind to the truth. One evening, I followed her. I didn't do it recklessly, but I needed to see for myself. I watched as she met someone in a quiet street, someone she whispered to urgently, her expression tense, almost fearful. I couldn't hear everything, but I caught fragments of words. "Marcus's exposure. Don't let him find out." My chest tightened. She was plotting something. My father, my family, me. I retreated before she noticed me and spent the night turning the fragments over in my mind. I realized I had to act carefully. Confronting her now would be reckless. She was clever, and any false move could ruin the advantage I was slowly gaining. I needed patience, evidence, and strategy. The next day, I started watching interactions more closely. At dinner parties, she spoke differently depending on who was present. Around my friends, she was warm and charming, even flirtatious. Around business associates, she was careful, measured. Around my father, she seemed distant, almost fearful. It was a subtle fear, but I saw it, and in that fear lay the truth. She knew she was lying, and she knew I might discover it. I couldn't share these thoughts with my father yet. He was already under stress from work, and I didn't want him to worry unnecessarily. Joanne was the only one I trusted with the pieces I had so far. She encouraged me to document everything, to be meticulous. "You need a map of her lies before you can confront her," she said. Her voice was calm, but I could sense the urgency beneath it. Days turned into a week, and my suspicions grew. Every day, a new small detail added to the picture. Mary's careful words, her avoidance of direct questions. The way she looked at me when she thought I wasn't noticing, it all told me that she was hiding more than I could see. And then, something happened that made my heart sink. I received a letter in the mail. It wasn't addressed to me, but it was meant for Mary. It was an invitation to a meeting, something secretive and important. I debated tearing it up, ignoring it, but I couldn't. Curiosity and fear drove me to open it. The letter contained hints about an upcoming business discussion involving my father, something Mary had no right to be involved in. My suspicion became reality. She was using lies about my father to manipulate people to gain influence. That night, I confronted her not with anger, not with accusations, but with careful questions. I wanted to see her reaction, the cracks in her carefully constructed facade. She answered some things, evaded others, and for the first time, I saw fear in her eyes. Fear that I might know more than I should. Fear that her lies might not hold forever. After she left, I sat with Joanne again. We went over every small detail I had noticed over the past few days, the messages, the behaviors, the secret meeting, the lies about my father. We started connecting the dots, forming a strategy. If I could catch her in a lie that mattered, one that affected someone outside just her and me, then the truth would come out naturally. The plan was not about revenge yet. It was about understanding, about making sure I had the full picture before acting. By the end of that week, I realized something important. Mary was not just lying for personal gain. She was building a story, a false narrative that involved people I loved, my father, and eventually, me. It was subtle, manipulative, and dangerous. But I also realized that I could see it clearly now. For the first time, the pieces were coming together. And with that clarity came a strange calmness. I was no longer blind. I knew who she was. I knew what she was capable of. And I knew that, when the time came, I could respond in a way she would never expect. The whispers of doubt had grown louder, forming a chorus that I could no longer ignore. And yet, as dark as it felt, it also gave me strength. Strength to watch, to wait, and to uncover the truth completely. Mary might have tried to control the story, but she had underestimated me, and that would be her greatest mistake. It happened on a quiet evening, the kind of evening that usually feels safe and ordinary, but this one would change everything. I had been gathering small pieces of evidence, watching Mary carefully and noticing patterns I had ignored before. But nothing could have prepared me for the lie I was about to uncover. I was at my father's office, helping him go through some documents for a client meeting. Marcus had always been meticulous, always honest, and he expected the same from everyone around him. That day, he seemed tense, almost hesitant. I asked him what was wrong, but he brushed it off at first. Then he looked at me, his eyes serious, and said, "Dorian, I need to ask you something about Mary." My heart sank. I nodded, urging him to continue. Marcus took a deep breath and explained that he had heard rumors about Mary, rumors that painted him in a dishonest light, suggesting that he had taken advantage of business partners and used influence for personal gain. He looked at me, searching my face for answers, confusion and hurt in his expression. I felt my stomach twist. Rumors about my father, and Mary's name had been mentioned. I had suspected her manipulation, but this was beyond anything I had imagined. I promised my father that I would find out the truth. That night, I confronted Mary. I approached it carefully, keeping my voice steady, even though anger burned inside me. "Mary," I said, "I need to know the truth. Did you say something about my father that isn't true?" She paused, blinking as if she had been caught off guard. For a moment, I saw hesitation, a flicker of panic, but then she laughed softly, trying to dismiss it. "I don't know what you mean," she said, her tone casual, almost too casual, but I knew she did. I pressed further, asking about specific incidents and conversations, mentioning the people who had heard her words. Her expression changed, the mask slipping for just a moment, and in that moment, I saw it fear and guilt. She had lied, and the weight of it was visible on her face. I didn't shout or argue. I didn't want to give her a chance to spin another story. I stayed calm, asking question after question, listening to her carefully. The more she spoke, the more contradictions I noticed. She denied some things outright, but other parts of her story didn't match what I had seen or heard. It was a tangle of half-truths and deception, all designed to confuse and manipulate. By the end of the conversation, I had no doubt Mary had lied about my father. She had created a story to make him look bad, to manipulate people's opinions, and to place herself in a position of control. My heart ached not just for the betrayal, but for my father, whose reputation and honor were being used as tools in her game. I left her apartment that night, walking through the empty streets, trying to make sense of it all. My mind raced with questions. Why would she do this? What did she gain? Did she care at all about the people she was hurting, or was it all about her? The answers didn't matter yet. What mattered was that I knew the truth, and with that knowledge came a sense of purpose. I decided to confront my father gently, not with anger, but with facts. I told him everything I had observed, every small detail, every lie, every contradiction. Marcus listened carefully, his face stern but composed. He didn't blame me for not noticing sooner. Instead, he focused on what we could do next. He reminded me that truth and patience were more powerful than anger and impulsiveness. His words grounded me, gave me clarity. The next days were tense. Mary acted as if nothing had changed, smiling, joking, planning our engagement events, pretending that our life was perfect. But I saw through it. Every word she said, every glance, every careful gesture revealed her fear of being exposed. I watched her closely, noting how she interacted with others, how she avoided certain topics, how she tried to control the narrative around my father. I realized then that her lie was bigger than I had thought. It wasn't just about manipulating opinions. It was about control, influence, and power. She wanted to position herself in a way that gave her advantage, using my father's reputation and my trust as tools. And the more I uncovered, the more I knew that this wasn't something I could ignore or forgive easily. One evening, I received an unexpected message from someone in her circle, someone who had no reason to lie to me. They hinted at Mary's actions, confirming my worst fears. She had been speaking about Marcus in a way that could damage his business and social standing. She had been planting seeds of doubt among people I respected, manipulating situations to her favor. I felt a mix of emotions: anger, disbelief, sadness, and a burning desire to set things right. But I didn't act rashly. I remembered my father's words about patience and truth. I knew that if I reacted impulsively, Mary could twist the situation, make me look unreasonable, or even use it against me. I needed a plan, and that plan needed to be careful and precise. I began documenting everything: messages, conversations, timings, meetings, inconsistencies. Every detail mattered. I couldn't afford to miss anything. I wanted to ensure that when the time came, the truth would be undeniable, and Mary's lies would unravel completely. It wasn't about revenge yet. It was about preparation, understanding her fully, mapping her moves, and being ready for the moment when her deception could no longer hide behind charm and false smiles. The weeks that followed were exhausting, but also empowering. I could see patterns I hadn't noticed before, ways she tried to manipulate people, ways she tried to control situations. And through it all, I kept my distance emotionally, even though it hurt. I couldn't let my feelings cloud my judgment. The woman I loved or thought I loved had betrayed not just me, but my father, and that betrayal demanded clarity before any action. By the end of that month, I had a clear picture. Mary's lie was not a mistake or a small white lie. It was calculated, intentional, and dangerous. She had underestimated me, underestimated the bond between my father and me, and underestimated the patience I could summon when I needed justice. And I knew, deep down, that once I revealed the truth, there would be no turning back. Mary's carefully constructed world of lies was about to be exposed, and when it happened, it would be undeniable. I thought I knew Mary. I thought I could trust her completely. I was wrong. The moment I uncovered her lies about my father, everything started to change. It wasn't just a lie, it was a fracture in the foundation of everything I believed in. And once that foundation cracked, nothing felt safe anymore. At first, I tried to act normal. I went to work, I met friends, I smiled at Mary as if nothing had happened. But inside, a storm raged. Every glance she threw my way, every touch, every word was a reminder that the woman I loved had betrayed my family. I started noticing things I had ignored before: the way she avoided direct eye contact when my father's name came up, the small smirks when I asked her about events she had clearly manipulated, the way she subtly tried to make me doubt myself. Marcus noticed the tension too. One evening, he invited me to his study. "Dorian," he said quietly, "something is changing between you and Mary. I can feel it." I hesitated. How could I explain? Could I even put into words the betrayal I felt? My father had always trusted me to make decisions, to handle situations wisely. But this was different. This was personal. This cut deeper than any business problem or social conflict. I told him the truth, everything I had uncovered, the lies, the manipulations, the messages, and the secret meetings. Marcus listened carefully, nodding occasionally, his face calm but serious. "I knew she was clever," he said finally, "but I didn't expect her to deceive like this. Dorian, trust is everything, and you have every right to feel the way you do." His words didn't make the hurt go away, but they grounded me. They reminded me that I wasn't alone in facing this betrayal. Mary, of course, had no idea that I had discovered the full extent of her deceit. She continued to act normal around me, pretending that our life was perfect, that nothing had happened. But I could see through the act. Every laugh sounded hollow, every touch felt calculated, and every conversation had an edge I couldn't ignore. I began to withdraw emotionally, not because I wanted to, but because I needed to protect myself. I couldn't let her see that I knew too much. The more I observed her, the more I realized how much she had woven her lies into every part of our life. She had friends who unknowingly supported her deception, social events carefully planned to hide truths, and even small gestures meant to manipulate my emotions. It was exhausting to see it all, but I couldn't look away. I had to understand the full picture before taking any action. One evening, Mary tried to bring me into a discussion about our engagement plans. She smiled, leaning close, her voice soft and sweet. "Dorian, I want us to move forward. We can leave the past behind." I looked at her, feeling a mixture of anger and disbelief. How could she speak of moving forward when she had broken the trust that held our relationship together? I stayed calm, nodding, but inside, I was building a plan. I needed her to feel secure enough to keep speaking freely so that her next lie could reveal itself. I reached out to Joanne again, desperate for guidance. She listened patiently as I described the tension, the emotions, and the small inconsistencies I noticed daily. "Dorian," she said gently, "you're at a turning point. You need to protect yourself and your father, but you also need to prepare for the moment when the truth will come out. Right now, it's about strategy, not confrontation." Her advice was hard to follow emotionally. Every day, I wanted to confront Mary, to demand answers, to express the anger and betrayal that burned inside me. But I knew Joanne was right. Acting on emotion would give her the upper hand. I had to stay calm, stay observant, and wait for the perfect opportunity. The collapse of trust affected more than just my relationship with Mary. It began to ripple through my life. I found it hard to focus at work, distracted by thoughts of her lies. I noticed my friends treating me differently, sensing the tension even when I tried to hide it. My father became worried, not just about Mary, but about the strain on me. Even simple conversations with colleagues felt weighted, as if everyone knew a storm was brewing. Mary, oblivious to my growing awareness, began to slip further. Small mistakes appeared in her stories, tiny inconsistencies that I had missed before. One evening, I overheard her speaking on the phone in a way that confirmed she was manipulating others against my father, twisting truths to her advantage. My heart sank, but also sharpened. Every lie she told was now a tool I could use. Every deceit was a thread that could unravel her carefully constructed life. The turning point came when I found a document she had accidentally left behind it. Message meant for someone else that clearly involved my father's reputation and her schemes. I held it in my hands, heart racing. It was undeniable proof that Mary had been lying, planning, and manipulating. I could feel the weight of it pressing down on me, but also a sense of power. Now I had what I needed. I just had to wait, watch, and prepare for the right moment to act. The collapse of trust was complete. I no longer felt the warmth or security that had defined my relationship with Mary. I could no longer believe in her words or her gestures. Every smile, every touch, every promise had been tainted by deceit. But amidst the heartbreak, I felt a spark of determination. I would not let her lies destroy my father, my life, or my sense of justice. I would rebuild trust on my own terms, with the truth as my weapon. It was a lonely period. I withdrew emotionally from Mary, spending more time with Joanne and my father, seeking strength and guidance. I learned to control my anger, to channel my hurt into careful observation and planning. Every day, I pieced together more of Mary's deception, connecting threads that had once seemed insignificant, and with each piece, my resolve grew stronger. By the end of that month, I knew two things for certain. One, Mary had betrayed me and my father in ways I could never forgive casually. Two, I had the power to expose her, to reveal the truth, and to protect the people I loved. The collapse of trust was painful, devastating, and disorienting. But it was also the moment I realized that the next steps would define everything: my reputation, my family, and the woman who had once been the center of my world. After the collapse of trust, I knew I couldn't act recklessly. My emotions were raw, and my anger burned beneath the surface. But I also realized that acting on impulse would only give Mary the advantage. She was clever, manipulative, and skilled at twisting situations. If I wanted to expose her, I needed a plan, a strategy that would leave no room for doubt and no chance for her to defend her lies. I started by going over everything I had learned: the secret meetings, the misleading conversations, the messages she had tried to hide. Every detail became a piece of the puzzle. I wrote it all down, organized it, and looked for patterns. The more I reviewed, the more I understood her methods. She wasn't careless. Every lie was intentional, designed to manipulate opinions and protect herself. That meant my approach had to be careful, precise, and just as intentional. Joanne became my confidant and strategist. We would meet late at night, reviewing evidence, making plans, and thinking through every possible outcome. "Dorian," she said one evening, "this isn't about revenge in the way people think. You're not trying to hurt her emotionally or publicly just for the sake of it. You're exposing the truth. That's justice, not vengeance." Her words grounded me. I wasn't out for cruelty. I was out for fairness, for clearing my father's name, and showing Mary that lies cannot hold forever. The first step was gathering concrete evidence. I began saving messages, recording conversations discreetly, and collecting any documentation that proved her deception. Each piece of evidence made me feel more in control, less vulnerable. It also gave me clarity. Seeing her lies laid out in front of me made the manipulation undeniable. Every step she had taken to hide the truth became part of the story I could now tell. Next, I needed to understand her motivations fully. Why had she lied about my father? What did she hope to gain? I observed her interactions with friends, colleagues, and family. I listened carefully to the way she spoke, the choices she made, and the subtle manipulations she attempted. It became clear that she wanted influence and control. She had underestimated my awareness, and that miscalculation would become her undoing. I also focused on timing. Confronting her too early could backfire. She was skilled at lying under pressure, and I needed to catch her when she felt secure, when she thought no one suspected her. That would be the moment her lies would slip naturally. Patience was crucial. I reminded myself of my father's words: "Truth and patience are stronger than anger and haste." I clung to that advice, letting it guide every move I made. Meanwhile, Mary continued her act of normalcy, unaware that I was piecing together the full picture. She smiled, she laughed, she planned our engagement as if nothing had happened. But I watched closely, noting every slip, every hesitation, every contradiction. She began to show cracks, tiny ones at first, but they grew as her web of lies became harder to maintain. I created a mental map of all the people she had involved in her lies. Friends, colleagues, acquaintances, everyone played a role in the story she had spun. I began contacting people discreetly, asking questions without revealing my intentions. Some were unaware of her deception. Some had noticed inconsistencies, but were too cautious to act, and a few were unknowingly helping her manipulate situations. Piece by piece, I gathered information that would support my case, strengthen the truth, and make her lies undeniable. One of the most powerful tools in my plan was timing her exposure at a moment when her lies could not be defended. I knew that once the evidence was presented, there would be no room for argument, no chance for her to twist the situation. It was a careful balance waiting until the truth would have the greatest impact without letting her become suspicious. Patience was as important as evidence. Joanne helped me stay grounded.